focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show. Well, happy Wednesday there, folks. Brian Nichols here on The Brian Nichols Show, and thank you for joining us on today's episode. Yeah, misinformation, it's not new here in the United States. Before we get there, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsor. That is the Expat Money Summit 2022. Watch for a week. Reap the benefits for generations interested in learning more about this free virtual summit taking place November 7th through 11th, 2022, where you can see 5 days and 30 expert speakers. We'll head to briannicholsshow.com/expat and get your free tickets today. Folks, I'm so excited for today's episode because, yes, we have a returning guest, like yesterday's episode with David Bellman, which I'll make sure I include the link there at the end of the show today. But today's guest, we're talking about the topic of misinformation and the fact that, no, it's not new here in the United States. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much been around since the United States itself. Caleb Franz from Profiles in Liberty joins us here on the show today. Caleb, welcome back to the Brian Nichols Show.
Brian, it's good to be back as always. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Great to have you on the show, my friend. And it was great to see you back when you were in town here. You visited up you were down in Louisville. I'm now up here in Indiana. So you came and visited yours truly.
We're in driving distance.
I know, right? And you visited your leader too, Chris Spangle, over in Indianapolis. We got to hang out, have a nice sit down meal. And then of course we got to do a podcast. I mean, can we not do a podcast when we get together? But
we had a long conversation, and then we were like, we should probably start recording. Yeah,
we should hit the record button. Yeah, and thank God we did, because it was a very good conversation, and we actually ended up, I don't know if you noticed this, but we ended up reiterating a lot of things that we had talked about on our first time go through with the conversation itself. So with that being said, though, I'm so excited to have you on the show today because you just wrote a new article that aired over at Real Clear History. And it talks about the fact that misinformation, it's not new, right? We've known misinformation. It's as I said in the intro, it's as old almost as the history of the United States itself. And who better to write about this than the host of Profiles in Liberty? So Caleb, talk to us. Misinformation. What is the idea of misinformation? Help us define it. What is it? And then what do you mean when you talk about it being as old as really the United States itself?
Yeah, well, I wrote this article in Real Clear History a few weeks ago because this really was sort of the dominating topic of our political discourse at the time, and it has been for quite some time. It's kind of faded in and out of how relevant it has been, but the idea of should we try to censor certain disinformation? Is this disinformation potentially harmful to people if we just let it go about? Is free speech absolutism something that we can really stand behind in the 21st century? And I was reminded of this story that took place in the early 1790s. The late 1790s. About how none of these questions are really all that new. These are all questions that we've been asking ourselves since the conception of our nation, since not even a decade after the Bill of Rights was put into effect. And those are questions that the founding fathers were able to not just sort of find the answer to with the Bill of Rights, but also confirm that is in fact the case, that the spirit of free speech, even if it's potentially harmful or even if it's potentially deceitful or misinformation in this sense, that is also protected speech as well. And that's why we have to protect it, because if we can't protect that, then there's not much standing in the way between that and speech that you or I might find completely normal, but someone else might find offensive or potentially false.
I mean, let's put the context in here, right? Like if we were to take a snapshot of where we are as a country, as a society, as a culture today, and show the founding fathers and the framers who we are, do you think that they would be okay with, our morals, our ethics? Probably not. And yet we've gotten to where we are today because we've had the freedom to do so, and we've had the ability to have controversial or sometimes some strange opinions and ways of doing things. And because we have the ability to have that freedom of speech, that's okay. And we can bring those ideas into the marketplace of ideas and actually challenge them. Do people want to have more of this different way of doing things, this different way of thinking about things? And that is where you start to see not just the conversations change, but then you start to see policy change. You start to see culture change. You see change in the way that societies are pointing. And is that for, better for worse? The American experiment? I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, but I'd say that the free speech idea across the board has shown to be, time and again, resoundingly, yes, a good thing to help inspire countries and a society to flourish and to have an open and free ability to communicate ideas.
Yeah, that's right. And so what is this story that I'm talking about that I wrote about here? In 1798, during the John Adams administration, one of the very founding fathers who helped Thomas Jefferson pen the Declaration of Independence in 1776, the one who lobbied for independence earlier than most other founding fathers did, is the same person who also put pen to paper and signed what is now the infamous Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. Now, there were three Alien Acts and one Sedition Act. The Alien Acts mostly centered around it centered around citizenship. It centered around what the threshold was to be able to expel certain immigrants from the country. At the time, tensions were very high with the nation of France, and there was a little bit of political there was a little bit of political reasoning for why they wanted to pass it, because typically immigrants, in particular French immigrants, tended to lean a little bit more Republican than they did Federalist. Republican in the sense of the Jeffersonian Republicans, not
Wait,
necessarily
time out,
what
Kim.
we
Are you
know
telling me
today.
that people have approached immigration with a political lens from the
With the
very
political
beginning?
lens from the very beginning, yes. It's
What?
hard to believe, but it's
Say
always
it
been a
so.
very, very politicized topic, yes.
Okay, sorry,
But
continue.
the most egregious act, and the one that took the offense of the Republicans of the day, Jefferson's party, and Thomas Jefferson himself, was the Sedition Act. They saw this as a complete infringement upon the First Amendment that they just passed less than 10 years earlier. Now, the Federalists didn't see a problem in this, because what they were actually banning was not any sort of free speech, as the way that they would define it, in the sense that speech that has been commonly upheld in the common law, but rather speech that is seditious or malicious or potentially false. Now, who decides what seditious, malicious, or false is? Well, obviously, it's going to be the Federalists that were in charge of the government at the time. Now, the comparison that I draw here is not necessarily that anyone is drafting up a new Sedition Act in Congress currently. Whether or not we get there in another 10, 20 years, I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I'm not someone who can look into the future. But a lot of the same arguments that the Federalists were using as justification for censorship at that time are exactly the same arguments that people today, whether it be over situations such as using social media tech giants to silence or censor dissenting thoughts around the ideas of COVID, or having a difference of opinion on how to approach the situation in Ukraine. There are numerous examples of a situation where you may feel very passionately one way or another about what the right answer may be, But the point is not that you have to silence the opposition because it is potentially leading to harm. Because the only way that you can actually get to the truth is whenever speech is laid out freely, so people can have that open and honest discourse. And whenever you have those gatekeepers in the way, that ultimately leads to more disinformation than if speech was unfettered.
Well, you know, it's funny how things happen. I'm notorious for falling asleep to watching YouTube. I don't know why I need to have like something audible to listen to, so I'm not like just thinking about things all day long. Like, oh, did I do this? Oh, did I do that? It's like just fall asleep watching something, Brian. And one of the things I fell asleep watching the other day was like Nazi World War II tech, and I know, like random, but
Yes.
it works, right?
Right.
And with that, so wait, where were we going? Reiterate your last point you just made. Sorry.
That's if misinformation is truly to be combated, it's not going to be through gatekeepers. It's
Yes,
not
there we
going
go.
to
Okay,
be.
sorry. Yeah, so
It's going to be
there we go.
through
Nazis.
unfettered
Yeah,
speech.
Nazis become full circle.
Yes.
So with the Nazis and how political correctness, that was actually like one of the main focuses of the Nazi Party when they were focusing on cracking down on what they considered to be misinformation, right? And it was through the lens of political correctness, getting rid of the alternative speech that was out there. So you see this, right? And to your point, there is a desire by those more do-good voices to politically limit what the speech should be in the name of some arbitrary cultural collectiveness. And that right there, I think the collectiveness is the scary part, right, Caleb? Because if we do go back down to the individual having free speech as the individual, as that one person, then all of a sudden you can plant that seed and that idea can flourish anywhere versus this one, NPC group thing, mob mentality, hive mentality that we've seen just get worse and worse and worse over the past few years.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that what really kind of the sort of dramatic moments in this story that I am telling, the climax of the story ultimately comes to head in the election of 1800. When Thomas Jefferson and John Adams essentially go at each other for the seat of the presidency. Obviously, John Adams lost that in large part due to the Alien and Sedition Acts that were passed in 1798. Now, Thomas Jefferson's inaugural address, I think, is really the ultimate sort of the ultimate lesson that we can learn. And he kind of wrote this great American ethos again, as he does because he's so great with a pen. And he explains the differences that, yes, we're all Federalists, we're all Republicans. As Americans, we're going to have differences of opinion, and that's fine, so long as those differences of opinion are allowed to exist in the marketplace of ideas. And that's very much paraphrasing. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but essentially, the point that he was trying to get at is that if opinions are allowed to fester in society unadulterated and uninterrupted, then the best ideas are going to float to the surface. People have a low tolerance for falsehoods. People have a low tolerance for misinformation in a natural state of order. The media and the state that we know it as today is very good at promoting a lot of false information, a lot of misinformation, and it allows us to get hooked into these like tribal nativist mindsets. But when free speech is truly allowed to flourish by itself, a lot of that gets filtered through by itself as well.
Caleb, you took the words right out of my mouth, and I wrote it down before you even said the words. And it was a low tolerance for misinformation. And you look at what's happened with the mainstream corporate media, and you know what? You're 100% right. But before we get there and we dig into that, we're going to go ahead and quickly divert your attention towards, yes, our morning sales huddle. If you have not had the chance yet, folks, head over to briannicholsshow.com where you can sign up for our morning sales huddle once a week. Yours truly will email you the proven sales the sales success tips. Say that 10 times fast, Caleb. That I truly have, yours truly has brought to my sales team to help them with their success. If it's something you're interested in learning more about, please go ahead and sign up for our morning sales huddle, and you'll see the tips delivered to your inbox once a week. And then, of course, I will go ahead and shoot over a copy of my free ebook, 4 Easy Steps You Can Implement Now to Help Sell Liberty to Friends and Family. But no, Caleb, the media, right? Going back to the media, they have over the past 10 years just absolutely neutered any trust that they had with the American public. I remember fondly going back to CPAC back in the day, right? When I was a little redheaded conservative. I didn't have a red hat. That was before that time. Man, that would have been wild, though, to go to CPAC back in the day. If it was like actual old CPAC, but then with Trump, and he was actually Trump in 2016, that'd be an interesting world. But anyways, I remember the world of Ron Paul, Rand Paul. They were the ones winning the CPAC poll. So CPAC was different back in the day. And just imagining, that world where you had the old bumper stickers that I don't believe the liberal media or stuff like that. Like, I don't know why I get a little, like Midwest accent. I don't know if that's a thing I'm doing. Is in like sprinkling that into my conversations now I live here.
You're appropriating the culture.
I know it must be. but no, it's something you've seen where the Brian Steltlers of the world, they'll stand there with reliable sources behind them, and it's like, okay, yeah, are you? And they'll smile to death in the camera to tell you, you're square in the face, that yes, 100% that they're the one you should be trusting, and yet their numbers continue to plummet. It's why they hate Joe Rogan. It's why they've gone after him. It's why they've gone after anybody who does not toe the corporate line. So I guess, Caleb, and I frame all that. Where does this go? What do we do? I mean, we're seeing there is a pushback. Elon Musk, the takeover of Twitter, which appears to be imminent at this point. We've seen that take place, and that's been a huge kick to the left. But is this something that is sustainable? Is the free speech warriors that are out there, are they actually winning? Are we going to see this continue? Or is the more regressive, more controlling speech advocates out there, are they going to have their time in the sun to shine?
I do think ultimately that that the proponents of these ideas are ultimately going to win out in the end, but it is not going to be easy, and it will likely get worse before it gets better if we look back to history as a guide. Some of obviously Thomas Jefferson and the Republicans won out in 1800, and ultimately the ideas of free speech won the day during that great battle. But it wasn't just a simple fact of, well, they passed this, and then there was this massive pushback, and then Thomas Jefferson won the election in 1800. It got much darker than before it got brighter. A congressman was thrown into jail because he criticized the Adams administration. Benjamin Franklin's grandson died in jail because he ran a paper that was anti-federalist and anti-Adams. And there are easily ways in which we have to sort of prepare ourselves to understand that it's not necessarily going to be an easy fight. It's not going to, like, freedom as itself has never been something that has been easily maintained. It's always been a little messy and always been a little muddy. However, there is hope at the end of this. And I don't think that we should look at history as a 1-for-1. I think that's the wrong approach. I think the approach should be the lessons that is taken away from it, the moral of the story. And that's what I try to do with Profiles in Liberty, is that I try to show exactly what happened and then what's the takeaway. It's not going to be that, these things are going to happen exactly the same. But with that being said, it is easy to look at, and it is easy to say things might get a little bit darker before they get a little bit brighter, but it's going to be okay because we are going to make it to the other side of the tunnel.
And you brought it up. We can point to history to see where freedom heads. And we go back to our friend, Dr. Adrian Bajan, Duke University, Constructo Law, and his idea that freedom is in fact nature. And in life, in anything, things will move towards whatever is the most free, whatever is the easiest to go towards. And in this case, free speech will absolutely win the day. It will continue to win the day. It has won the day from pretty much the time that the idea of free speech has become one that we have openly embraced. And I think as long as we continue to foster that, yes, to your point, Caleb, free speech will indeed win the day. And then down the road, we can have folks like you in the future doing podcasts on us, fingers crossed, talking about what we were able to do when we're leading the charge here to fight back and lead for free speech. So with that being said, obviously we want folks to go ahead and learn more about the podcast you're doing, where you're going ahead and talking about those former liberty warriors. And I say liberty lovers because they did love liberty. And in some cases, they put their lives on the line for that liberty. You're doing a great podcast, Profiles in Liberty. We've had you in the show many a time to dig into that. But talk to us. I know season 2 just wrapped up. You're in the process of writing season 3. What can we expect to see when we head to season 3? And what can viewers go ahead and expect when they go and check out seasons 1 and seasons 2?
Yeah, so season 2 just wrapped up in March. We had a great season with a few of my personal heroes and some people that I really came to appreciate and to adore a lot more than what I had even realized before writing the season. That's part of the joy of making the show, is that there are new layers to these people that I had known about or had a certain level of appreciation, but didn't always understand quite as much as I should have. That's kind of part of the fun about it, is that it's a giant learning process, not just for the listeners, but for me as well. So it's something that I get to share with my audience, and it's something that I really love doing about making this show. Season 2 was all about what a group of people that I've dubbed the equalizers. These are people who fulfilled the promise of 1776. People like the guy who's, I don't know if you can see him right here behind me, but Frederick Douglass, and individuals like Mercy Otis Warren and Abigail Adams and Harriet Tubman. These are all people who understood that what they were able to accomplish with the Declaration of Independence and with independence itself in 1776 was not meant to be the end. It was meant to be the beginning of something incredible, something where liberty was going to spread to all corners of the earth and encompass the world like wildfire. They understood that, and they were determined to make sure that that promise was going to be fulfilled. The first season, in that same vein, is about the people who made that promise in 1776 during that summer. And in this upcoming season, we have a lot of really, really fun individuals. Season 3 is going to debut this fall. So I'm hard at work writing the scripts right now for it, but there's still so many people to highlight, and so many people that deserve their due, their limelight in the sun, that I'm excited to bring forward to you all.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure that we continue this conversation, Caleb, because you're always bringing on interesting voices in history that I think a lot of people have either not remembered. They maybe heard the name back when they were in history class, but they never really got to dig too deep, or these are voices that have been lost, unfortunately, to the history books, because we've talked about this in the past. History is written by the winners and those who are actually going out and writing the textbooks. And that's why it's so important for us to make sure that we're speaking their stories to others. We're telling what their views were, what their mission was, and why what they did was so important for our posterity going forward. So thank you, Caleb, for what you do over at Profiles in Liberty. Can't wait for season 3. And folks, if you want to go ahead and get all your history knowledge here in the Liberty Movement, head over to We Are Libertarians. You can find not only Caleb's phenomenal program, Profiles in Liberty, but yes, you can find yours truly, The Brian Nichols Show, amongst, I think, Caleb? We have 14, 15 other shows now over at the We Are Libertarians podcast networks. It's
too many to count.
It's growing day after day. I know, it's great. Yeah. And our family
is a good problem to have.
It's getting bigger and bigger. And I'm so excited to see where the future is heading. So folks, if you enjoyed today's episode, my goodness, number one, you're going to love yesterday's episode. We had David Bellman here on the program from Bellman Homes, where we talked about the impact on inflation on small business owners. If you missed that, I'll make sure I include that link here at the end of today's episode. But also, if you enjoyed the episode, please do me a favor and make sure you go ahead and give today's episode a share. And when you do, make sure you go ahead and give Caleb some love as well when you're there. And make sure you tell him that Brian told you to do so. So with that being said, folks, thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. As always, I am your humble host, Brian Nichols. Thank you for joining us. With that being said, it's Brian Nichols signing off for Caleb Franz from Profiles in Liberty. We'll see you next time.
Listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.